Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here with U.S. Under-23 men's national team head coach Jason Kreis, and we're here to talk about our final 20-player tournament roster for the CONCACAF Men's Olympic Qualifying Championship. Jason, if you want to start us off with a few opening comments, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I mean, another exciting day down here where we're taking another giant step forward towards qualifying this team for the Olympics. It's been a difficult process to come to some of these decisions, but the guys have worked extremely hard down here, and we're thankful for everybody's input. So we move forward now knowing what our roster is going to look like and start to prepare for Costa Rica.
Thank you, Jason. And now we'll start with questions. If you have a question you'd like to ask, go ahead to the bottom bar and raise your hand with the button down there. I think starting off, we'll go with Brian Scaretta from American Soccer Now. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chris. Quick question, two-part question. First of all, have you decided on a captain? If so, who? And if not, what are you looking for in that role? And then also, Uli Lanes probably hasn't had the season that he wanted to have at Heerenveen with his loan getting cut short and hasn't played much. What have you seen from him in training regarding fitness and sharpness so far in camp?
So yeah, for the first part of the question, the captain situation, we haven't made a final decision yet. We definitely have a group of players that we're looking towards as being leaders in this group. I think that we'll move towards that decision over the next probably 3 or 4 days and let that person know that, and we'll share that with the rest of the world if it's wanted, no problem. And then with Uli's situation, yeah, I don't think it's any secret that he hasn't had a great season. You know, that's been a little bit, I think, influenced, number one, by a pretty serious injury that he took about a couple of months ago to his knee, and number two, he's had a family situation that he's had to deal with over the last couple of weeks. Those things have added together to mean that he hasn't probably been in the proper training environment for him. He has spent some time in LA working on his own to make sure that he was fit and ready for this opportunity. You know, he's a player that I think has some things to offer our group that not all of the wingers do. And so, you know, even though I wouldn't say he's at 100% fitness right now, he's a guy that we believe in. He's a guy that has shown real hunger and commitment to play the way that Greg and the national teams have asked him. He's done very well with the full team. And he's a player that gets probably a little bit more of an opportunity than others might because of that. So I feel like he's a player that we're building, have been building over the last however long we've been here now, 10, 11 days, and we'll continue to build his fitness so that he's ready for the matches late next week.
Thanks, Brian. Next up, we'll take Jeffrey Carlisle from ESPN. Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, Jason. I was wondering if you could walk me through the thought process behind the forwards that you chose. Obviously a lot was made of Abobasi not even being in camp, but just, what was your thinking in terms of the guys that you picked?
Are you referring to the nines?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, again, Jesus is an interesting one, probably the most interesting one, because he hasn't played a whole lot of striker for FC Dallas. They typically will use him in the midfield. But the way that we want to utilize our 9 means that Jesus is the perfect candidate for that. And having Jesus in last January camp and then having him again in this January camp, we see a player that really seems to understand and fit our game model in that position. And then we see in his performance in the match, it was excellent, really, really excellent in the match against Trinidad. So he's a guy that we are looking at in that position. And then we have Sebastian Soto, another player that over the past 4 or 5 months with his full national team experience has taken advantage of his opportunity. And so those are the 2 players that I at this moment, I feel I would evaluate them a little bit higher than Jeremy. That's the only reason why Jeremy wasn't included. But Jeremy's a lot like a lot of the players that didn't end up making this final roster, in that I'm a big fan of his, and a lot of these players didn't make the roster. But unfortunately, we're only allowed to bring 17 field players to this tournament.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Thanks, Jeff. Next up, we'll take Kevin Baxter from the LA Times. Go ahead, Kevin. I think you're still muted.
There we go. Thanks, Chris. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Yeah.
If I could take a little bit of a broader perspective on this, I understand the U-23 team is there's no momentum. It's new every 4 years, but the U.S. has only qualified for the Olympics once since 2000. This is arguably, if you look at the big talent pool with Pulisic and the guys in Europe, this is by far the best team we've ever had. How important is it to qualify this time, to finally sort of break through? And did the 1 year delay hurt you guys? It seemed like you guys were ready to go a year ago, and then you had to sit around and wait, and we were unsure when you were going to get here. How much did that hurt you, if at all? Thank you.
Big question. Big question. A lot of parts there. I'll try to speak to all of them.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So, first and foremost, I would agree with, I'll tackle the second part of your question first. I do feel that last year, our momentum was really, really good heading into the qualification. I felt like the entire group, there was so many of the group that had been in the January camp, had worked with us, 5 or 6 times in that year leading up to things. We had a really good understanding of the pool. I think the team had a really good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And then add on to that there had already been, I think, 3 MLS matches before the qualification. So now you add in that match fitness. Whereas this year, I think we're in a situation where we have a lot less match fitness. I feel like we've kind of entered this training period starting on March 1st with a lot of these players that haven't played a match since I think October, a lot of these guys. And so you're really kind of going into this time thinking, okay, this is almost like a preseason. Fortunately, very, very fortunately, we had quite a few of these guys in the January camp, so I think they did have some base fitness. So we made a real big emphasis with all of these guys that they needed to be working extremely hard between that camp in January and March 1st. So for 6 weeks, they were kind of on their own, left to really, really push their fitness. So they did come into this camp, not like a typical preseason team. They came in with a good base level of fitness, and we've been able to work pretty well to get to the point where we are now. The second part of your question, which was it?
About, the U.S. has only qualified once since 2000, and we got such a great deep team now. How important is it to push through this time?
Yeah, I just think that it's important for U.S. Soccer to continue to kind of lay down markers. Under 17, under 20, under 23, we need to continue to lay down markers that we are a dominant team in this region. And so, yeah, I do believe that this is an important moment for us to continue on that path, to continue to change people's opinions about our national team programs.
Thanks a lot. Good luck and be safe.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up, we'll take Ron Blum from the Associated Press. Ron, go ahead.
Hey, Jason. When you look at your roster and your player pool, and you talk to Greg Berhalter about it, how do you see your group linked to the full team program? And do you see many of these players contributing throughout the compressed run of qualifiers that start in September?
You mean compressed run of full team qualifiers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is an interesting question because, the truth is that Greg and I have a lot of communication with each other, as well as all the assistant coaches in the full national team program. We all have a lot of communication about these players. We have continued to do that over the last, whatever it is, almost 2 years now, that we've since we've embarked on this endeavor. And we do talk a lot about whether or not guys are seen in, from the entire group's perspective as full national team players. And so what I think we end up with is a nice balance of guys that are definite projections for the full team and other guys that are just at this moment going to really, really help us to qualify. And so, I don't think anybody's going to live in a world where every player here is a top prospect at this moment, right? But what we all need to keep our minds and hearts open to is that those things can change. A player that we may be looking at right now is just going to help us to qualify ourselves for the Olympics could start to perform at a different level, at a higher level, and now all of a sudden he's a full national team prospect. So that's the world we live in soccer, where things change so often and day by day. Just your opinion on players can change, from 1 week to the next. You'd be surprised that how coaches can change their opinions quite rapidly.
Thank you, Ron. Next up, we'll take Sam Stetchkol from The Athletic. Sam, your microphone should be unmuted now.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate you guys doing this. Jason, I'm curious just kind of about your central midfield selection. There are a number of more defensive-minded guys and not quite as many central forward-facing options or attacking options, traditional attacking options.
Yeah.
Calculus is available in those attacking roles than the defensive ones.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, I think you kind of addressed your own question. I think so. You're breaking up a little bit, but first and foremost is availability, right? I mean, we have last year at this time we had Brendan Aronson and Richie Ledesma. Both players are unavailable, so you're kind of looking at the pool and saying what's on tap a little bit more. Also, I think what's important for people to understand is that a lot of these players are asked to play in a different system in their clubs than they are here. And so you may see a guy like Hassani Dotson who plays next to another holding midfielder in Minnesota, but has a little bit more ability to go forward. Isn't usually the one at Minnesota that's going to sit most often in front of the back four. So he has capabilities to be a little bit more attacking. Perhaps he's just not asked to do it in his club. So a lot of these guys, I feel we have a lot of guys that, in my my humble opinion, are more 8s than they are necessarily 10s or 6s. And in the way that we are playing right now in the national team's programs, it's really good. We aren't going to necessarily have a player that has a free role to sit in a number 10 spot. We need central midfielders that can do it all. And I feel like with this pool of guys that we've selected, they can all do it all. So I think we got some real versatility in our hands to use.
Thanks, Sam. Next up, we'll take Ivis Galarcep from SBI Soccer. Ivis, go ahead.
Jason, along those lines, as far as the attacking midfield role, Sam kind of touched on something I was curious about. You mentioned having some guys who are more 8s than, say, pure 6s. Johnny Cardozo, obviously, as a prospect, everyone kind of sees him. Oh, he's a 6. But it sounds like coming up, he did have attacking roles. What do you see him bringing to the table positionally? And as far as Jesus Ferreira goes, obviously everyone's talking about the kind of him being able to be a false 9, but could we see him in a midfield role, in an attacking midfield role?
Yeah, so 2 parts to that question I think are both interesting. Most people, maybe most people don't know this, but Johnny Cardozo was developed as a 9. The first time I spoke to him, I was telling him, gosh, it keeps showing me here on Y-Scout that you're playing 9 and you're coming in here and now we're asking you to play 6. And so, the couple of times we've had him in the national team camps, once with the 23s, once with the full team. The first time in the 23s, I had him at 6, but then looked at him at 8 late in the camp and in the game. And he showed that he's got some real creative ideas in the attacking half of the field. So he's another player that I think is quite versatile. And the second part of your question again?
Jesus. Potentially playing in midfield.
Yeah, Jesus is like a lot of these guys in this roster, where they can play multiple positions. We think that I think, just again, my humble opinion, I think this guy's an incredible 9. I think when he arrives into the box, he finishes like a lot of others can't. I think he's terrific around the penalty box. And so, that's just my opinion, but you're right. We could certainly utilize him in a 10 position. We've got full backs that can play center back. We've got right backs that can play on the left back. We've got attacking midfielder, number 8 minded player in Hassani Dotson, who's played both right back and left back for Minnesota. We've got wingers that have played inside. So we feel like we've got enough versatility with this group that we should be able to put our best foot forward, no doubt.
Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ivis. Next up, we'll take Charlie Bohm from MLSsoccer.com. Charlie, go ahead.
Hey, Jason, I regret to inform you that I too have a 2-parter about 2 different areas of the field.
And I'll keep asking you to remind me the second part.
The first one is about your goalkeeping battle. Do you have someone have a pole position on that job, and if so, why?
Yeah, really, really interesting situation again. We were at the same situation last year where we have these 3 goalkeepers. We like all 3. And we're kind of looking at them like, okay, who can be the starter? I don't feel like anybody's really put that flag in the ground to say I'm the guy. And so now we have to make, I think, a really difficult decision. And I think what we're probably thinking about is maybe one gets the first game and the other gets the second game, and then based on that performance, we move forward. But I do think there's probably one in the group that's maybe played a few more MLS matches than the other, and he probably has a little bit of a slight pole position at the moment.
And then to follow up on Sam's question about the central midfield, you have two very good teams that you're playing in Costa Rica and Mexico in the first round, who are good both with and against the ball. Does that give you pause to have just one shield for the back line and those sorts of high stakes games against high level opposition?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we'll certainly consider as we look at these matches one at a time. Again, just my opinion, the way I see the game, I don't see us defending with one shield. I see us defending with three. That's what we really like about this defensive system, is that we've got, again, like I said, we've got three guys that in those positions that are going to be asked to be extremely mobile, to give us both sides of the ball and to move across the field together to cover all the spaces. So again, we feel that this is a positive situation. We don't look at it and say, okay, we've only got one holding midfielder. No, in my opinion, we've got three central midfielders.
Thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Next up, we'll take Ryan Tolmich from Goal.com. Ryan, go ahead.
Hey, Jason, appreciate you taking the time here. Now, looking at just this roster breakdown, you've got half the roster has played for the senior team, half the roster has played in a Youth World Cup before, and obviously this is a bunch of big games. There's not really much room for error here. When you look at that experience that this team brings, how helpful is it now that you're kind of going into this tournament where there isn't really that much wiggle room when it comes to actually getting into the Olympics?
Yeah, super, super helpful. And again, I think it's been one of the perhaps positives that's come out of this COVID situation, is that we've really been able to work with Greg and sort of mesh in a lot of the U-23 players into the last several full national team camps. And so those players have a really high understanding of the game model that's being asked of them. As well as just getting experiences playing against international competition. So that's been really super good for them. For the rest of the group, as you said, that's been involved in a CONCACAF qualifying, been involved in Youth World Cups, they understand what this picture looks like. And so that was an actual real consideration for us, as to when we looked at the players and said, okay, how many of these guys have already had some CONCACAF experience in qualifications?
Thank you, Ryan. Next up, we'll take Donald Wine from Stars and Stripes FC. Donald, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, Jason. I wanted to key in on a couple of players that I noticed had a change in designation on the listing, on the roster that you guys had, and that's Sebastian Soto and Uli Yanez. They were listed as forwards in your prelim roster, now listed as midfielders. I know listing doesn't really mean much, but can you tell me what that means from you on how you plan to employ them on the field and where you think they best fit in with this team?
Yeah, this is one that I won't answer. This is one that is left to you guys to make your own interpretations, and that's for a very specific reason.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Next up, we'll take Leon Lecanda from ESPN Mexico. Leon, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate head coach Jason Kreis. Thank you so much for your time. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, if you have any contact with Efrain Alvarez from Galaxy of Los Angeles, and if you have the possibility to call him for this pre-Olympic, because of the situation that he has the Mexican nationality, and he could opt with FIFA for playing for the US.
Yeah.
And the second, if it's possible, if your goal in this tournament is to win it or just to qualify for the Olympics. I mean, for the rivalry with Mexico, winning the tournament, what does it mean for you? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so on the first question, yes, Efrain Alvarez is a player that the men's national team program has a high level of interest in. From my point of view, it's important. I think it's important to know that it's not just the U-23 team that would like Efrain Alvarez to be a part of our efforts. So it's bigger than that. So I think it was more important that the full national team coach speaking to Efrain Alvarez, and that's how it's been. Greg has had very, very good communication and constant and regular communication with Efrain about what his pathway would look like with the men's national team programs. I think it needs to be a bigger a bigger topic because it's a bigger decision than just who he should play his U-23 soccer with. I think that's a much bigger conversation than one that I should have. So those conversations have been ongoing. He is a player that we have a high level of interest in, but he's also a player that we know he has the option to play for Mexico, and we believe that that's a really personal decision. So we just express our interest, express what we think about the pathway, and then say, of course, we're going to fully respect your decision on your own time. He communicated back with us that he just wasn't ready to make that decision. That's why I believe he's not on that's why I know he's not on our roster, and that's why I believe he's also not on Mexico's. So that's where that stands at the moment. He's just not ready to make his decision. The second part of your question about winning it, I'm going to be completely honest with you right now. Our focus is very, very narrow. Our focus is very, very narrow on Costa Rica, and that's it. After Costa Rica, we'll be very focused on Dominican Republic. After that, we'll be very focused on Mexico. So at the moment, it has nothing to do with winning the tournament. It has to do with winning against Costa Rica.
Thank you, Leon. Take our last few questions now, starting with Damian Calhoun of the Orange County Register. Damian, go ahead.
Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just want to get your thoughts on the performance of Julian Araujo in camp. What have you seen, and what do you expect out of him going forward as you guys get going next week into the games?
Yeah, Julian, interestingly enough, was in the very first camp that I had with the under-23s, and it was really kind of an awkward situation because the under-20s were at the same camp, and here I got this player and realized all of a sudden, wait, he's eligible for the under-20s. Why is he with us? But what was really fascinating about him was just the level of zero fear in this kid. Just zero hesitation about anything, whether that was getting into a tackle, putting his head into a dangerous situation, jumping to opponent fullback to win a long pass, or standing in front of the group and telling a joke. This kid's, I think, really, really interesting, has so much personality and so much fight to him that he's a guy that we've been very, very fond of from that moment forward. He's had one or two occasions now to play with the full national team, has done quite well, and so he's a player that we think has a big prospect in our program. So I have no doubts that he'll contribute in a major way here in this tournament.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damian. Next up, we'll take Jose Rodriguez from Deporte Total USA. Jose, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Jason, I wanted to ask a little bit about the tournament as a whole. There are a whole bunch of challenges for every single team participating. And I was just wondering, as a coach, how excited are you to see the tournament finally being played on, after waiting for a year? Is it the level of expectation, is there still as it was last year, or do you think the excitement is even higher now? Thank you.
I think in some ways it could be even higher now. I think because we waited so long for it, we've kind of gone through a phase where, it's not going to happen. The Olympics are going to be shut down. It is going to happen. It's not going to happen. Kind of going back and forth and listening to all of that noise. And so to now finally be here, I do think it's kind of like raised the level of enthusiasm about the situation. And so I feel a real good energy around the group. I feel like we're heading into this tournament and we will get to the place where I think we want to go with our fitness level and our match preparedness. And so, yeah, we're all super happy to be here and super ready to go.
Thank you, Jose. Next up, we'll take Juan Carlos Maigua. Sorry if I butchered that. From Area Sports Network. Juan Carlos, go ahead.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Kind of jumping from the previous question, but in regards to, I don't know if you heard that some of the games within the Mexican League are going to be allowed to be played with fans in the stadiums. I don't know if you guys have been notified if that change is going to be applied to the tournament coming up. Thanks.
Yeah. So this is another good question because this morning was the first that we've heard reports that there are going to be fans allowed up to 25% capacity. And so we look at that situation and say that it seems a little bit odd timing that we're just informing us so late because we know there's the difficulties of having fans come from the United States with only 1 week notice. But we'll look at it from the bright side and say, let's get it out there ASAP, and let's get some of our fans down here to support us. We'll hopefully be able to jump through that hoop and make that happen, because that will be really, really nice for our players to have some of their own fans in the stands.